understand that
This meeting is being recorded.
we understand that all of our tribal nations are not all rangelands, and we have quite a substantial amount of timber. I got invited to that meeting up in Colorado. I mean, not Colorado, Alaska, the Intertribal Timber Management Council meeting. But I wish I could go up there, but it kind of conflicts with some other pending meetings. So that's where this kind of originated. Discussion of this presentation, and now it's come to fruition with Sisto and Aaron and having Mr. Orlando Carroll on board with us again. Orlando brought it to my attention that he did present to us, and I remember his presentation, but it's so many things happened in the last couple of years. It just kind of everything kind of blends together. But I remember his presentation really stood out over in Prescott, and the crowd really got into it. So with that, I think I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of their evening to sit in on this presentation. And this is an effort by Indian Nations Conservation Alliance to address the multiple issues that are pertained under natural resource management and conservation and agriculture, and how they all kind of tie in together. We can't forget one for another. We got to try to manage them equally, and that's the task that that's the bigger part of the task is managing them equally and having a room for conservation in our management planning. So do I go ahead and Aaron, do you want to take over?
No, Sisto's moderating today.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So I'll go ahead and hand this over to Sisto to moderate. And thanks again for everybody signing in.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Sisto Hernandez, and I'm a conservation district coordinator with INCA. Previously, for close to 16 years, I was the range management specialist for the Fort Apache Indian Reservation in Arizona, where I'm a tribal member. And woodland management is something that was at least kind of at the forefront for me, and I noticed that it's something that tends to get overlooked. I mean, the woodlands and the woodland species, for me, it was more from the range management perspective, looking at things and looking at the encroachment of woodlands onto grasslands and savanna areas that have been more open historically. And then a lot of times those areas of grassland and savanna becoming woodland as a result of those things. Along within the traditional woodland stands, they're becoming a growing decadence of those species and the associated problems with that, such as the allelopathy that some juniper species, I don't know what to call it, inflict on the herbaceous species around them, and the problems that can cause with soil loss, erosion, and then just the whole cascade of things following that. And through conversations with others, I found that that's the same thing, where no matter what reservation you're on, or even with the Forest Service or the BLM, that there is a lot of attention paid to rangelands. There's a lot of attention paid to areas of merchantable timber, but that woodlands and woodland species tend to fall through the cracks, and they oftentimes can become a problem just because they're ignored, because there's not the attention paid that perhaps they deserve. And so that's why we organized this webinar tonight. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Orlando Carroll. Orlando Carroll is one of the supervisory foresters on our reservation, the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. He works for BIA Fort Apache Agency, branch of forestry. He's a timber sales administration, and he's been on our reservation for over 31 years. He is a tribal member on our reservation. Let me make sure to put that in there. Perhaps I should have led with that. Mr. Carroll is a graduate of Northern Arizona University way back in 1989. His degree is in forestry. He's also a certified silviculturalist. In addition to forestry and forest management, he has extensive experience in wildland firefighting, everything from being a crew boss all the way up to being a public information officer and everything in between. He's a strong member of our community with the White Mountain Apache tribe. Also, he's been a school board member for 12 years. Served as a community president. He's volunteered as an Apache language teacher on our reservation. And he's also been an advisor to our tribe's land restoration board. I think Mr. Carroll is an excellent example of what tribal ecological knowledge can be. He spent his entire career dedicated to this area we live in of the Arizona, New Mexico mountains and the ecological types associated here. And I think he's done an excellent job at melding his own knowledge coming from our reservation and from what he learned growing up there with the methods of modern science. And that's why we invited him here. Everyone, I'd like to, before I hand it off to Mr. Carroll, I would like to say, please hold your questions till the end, but by all means, enter any questions in the chat and we'll do our best to keep track of them so that we can have a discussion at the end of the presentation. And with that, Orlando, take it away.
Thank you, Sisto. It's a good opportunity to share information with INCA once again to talk about woodland management on tribal lands. And so I'll go ahead and start the presentation. Every time I give a presentation, we are to share with the group that we are presenting to policies that allow us to do activities in management. And so there are several that I like to mention. The 25 CFR Part 163 on forestry is one. Then we had a directive issued by the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs back on August 10 of 1987 that called for a woodland study to be conducted. And we also have the Indian Affairs Manual Part 53. We also have a forest management plan in place that was approved February 23 of 2005. And we had that extended once already so that we can continue to do activities on tribal trust lands on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. We also have a companion document to our forest management plan, which is the forest inventory analysis, and that was last approved on September 29 of 2010. Going on, the distribution of pinyon juniper woodlands in the Southwest US extends over many miles from Texas into New Mexico, and extensive acreage occur in Arizona and we are a part of that band of woodlands in the Southwest in our state, and also the reservation trust lands. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the next slide. Woodlands, it's broadly defined, and it refers to forests where woodland species exists, primarily pinyon pine, junipers. We have 4 on the reservation: Alligator, Utah, 1 seed, Rocky Mountain. Then we also have oak species like Campbell oak, Arizona white oak, emery oak, turbanella, silverleaf are the ones that stand out to me. Mesquite, we also have mesquite in our lowlands down to 2,000 foot elevation. We also have riparian areas that contain woodland species. Woodland species are present and form an open canopy as part of that definition. Back in 1986, before that directive came out from the Assistant Secretary, the BIA branch of forestry here at Fort Apache, in cooperation with the U.S. Forest Service Intermountain Research Station, conducted a woodland survey. And the survey consisted of 139 woodland plots. Half of our reservation is considered woodland. And so 139 is not a lot of plots when you think about the amount of acres that woodlands occur on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. And so it's the best information I got from the Forest Inventory Analysis of 2010. Those plots were 1/5 acre in size. They were fixed inventory plots. They were established on a double 5,000 meter systematic grid covering the woodland type. Continuing on, what was collected in the survey in the field was vegetative species, sizes, quantities, condition, and multi-resource uses. I put up this picture. It's an interesting picture of alligator juniper. Back about 2 months ago, they were pollinating heavily, and people interpret this to mean that this tree is dying because of the red coloration, but in actuality, it was the tree that was pollinating, and we had many acres that were in that condition this past March and into April. And so, it's good to know things about woodlands. Back in 1986, like I said, the first survey was conducted for woodlands, and then again in 1996. On the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, approximately 600,000 acres of woodlands exist. The results of the survey produced a summary table for Fort Apache. There was an analysis that was generated. There was this was done for management planning purposes, and the 139 plots were remeasured again in 1996. The data was used in the Fort Apache Forest Inventory Analysis document. The climate in general in our woodland areas. I show a picture here of one of our buttes, Sugarloaf, near Cedar Creek. Elevation is about 5,500 feet. And in general, for weather, it's classified as semi-arid, and the summer pattern of thunderstorm development is prevalent on the Colorado Plateau, influenced strongly by the monsoonal regime that originates from the Gulf of Mexico. And then usually July and August are our wettest months. And then I also come across that our region is primarily bimodal during the winter time, which means as winter storms develop, there comes a time there's a break and then they redevelop. And so that's what they refer to as bimodal. For precipitation, on average, in the form of snowfall and rainfall, in general, the amounts that we receive here at Fort Apache ranges from 12 to 15 inches per year. And if you are trained in centimeters, 30 to 40, the frost-free period could range from 120 days to 200 days. And then most of the moisture occurs during the monsoon season in the summer months of July, August, and sometimes into September. And then December to February is the winter season months. Okay, going on temperatures. They range from below minus 18 degrees Celsius, which is equal to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, or greater than 38 degrees Celsius, which is 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is the average. PJ Woodland temperatures are strongly influenced by elevation. In general, topography, extremely variable. As you can see in this slide here, this is the high elevation mountain range, which is called the White Mountains of Arizona. Our highest peak is right about here, Mount Baldy, which sits at 11,400 feet. And as you can see in the picture, there be steep slopes, plateaus such as this one here, canyons, very mountainous terrain, and lots of valleys to speak of. Our soil makeup are derived from sandstone, limestone, shale, and then at about 5,500 to up in the reaches of Mount Baldy at 11,000 feet, we have basalt, pumice, tough granite derived soils. There's an interesting point that is brought up in our forest inventory analysis, a really short section on soils. And it says there that the development of soil is limited strongly by the arid climate of the region. And in the woodland type, these particular soil types most likely will take a long time to develop or will not develop. And there's a list, alphasol, intasol, inceptasol, mollisol, and aridisol soil types. This is also found in raingle.org. You look that up. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far? Not, we'll move on. Woodlands are pretty important to Indian people, and these pictures will demonstrate some of the uses. Tribal members go out and collect piñons, and piñons is a historically important plant species for the Apache people, and it still is today. Very commercialized. Today, lots of sales of piñon nuts occur throughout Arizona and New Mexico. Then ceremonial use. The picture of this teepee during a sunrise dance ceremony for a woman who has become of age. The four poles that you see in this picture, they are all woodland species, and one is a juniper, one is piñon, the other is gamble oak, and the other one would be black walnut. And so the way I was taught was that these tree species represent important food sources for our people. And so therefore they are used as a part of our ceremony. Okay, other uses, of course, a big one is livestock grazing. And so as you see in this slide, juniper, pinyon, woodland type of a forest. And then this slide shows that our clan systems are tied to place names that include woodland areas and plant species. The names of plants are tied to our clan system, and so we recognize where groups of clans originate from due to the way their names are put together. And there's a lot of history that comes from that. And so it's very helpful information to know. Our historical fire regime in general in the Southwest US, especially on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, it talks about how in the Ponderosa Pine forest type, on average, historically, fires occurred 3 to 7 years. And in the woodland type, it's longer than that. But in a lot of cases, you don't see fire in woodland areas, and that's cause for concern for management. We do not actively conduct a lot of management activities in woodland areas, and so fire definitely is a concern today and for future. 2002, we had the Rodeo Chattiskai fire, and I took this picture about 3 years ago of one of the ridges on the Rodeo Chattiskai fire area. And as you can see, everything has greened back up, and we do have residual trees that remain on site. A lot of the steep slopes that you see in the slide represent in general what our woodland areas are like. And so woodlands, if they're not managed, is a cause for concern for fire management. Prescribed burning prescribed fire is a very important tool that I think a lot of land managers recognize. It plays an important role on ecosystem management and the maintenance of vegetative species. I have a slide here of an open grassland area in southern Arizona, and flame links, from what I saw from the highway, they were in the range of 5 to 10 feet. And so if this was a wildfire, it would be considered unsafe to send people in there, because anything in excess of 8 feet is considered hazardous for personnel to fight. And so, grassland prescribed burning contributes to an ecosystem that could be maintained and also help prevent catastrophic wildfires. Benefits of a prescribed fire. I saw this on a plaque in East Central Arizona within the last week, and I took a picture of it. I thought it would go well with this presentation. It says, grasslands and forests are valuable to us all. And then there's some points that they make: fewer catastrophic fires, more sightings of game and non-game species, clean and abundant water, and scenic values. And so very important point on prescribed fire. Catastrophic wildfire. This is a picture of a fire that burned recently in California that originated somewhere in a woodland area. And so it's migrating toward the high elevation timber stand. Dense forests and woodland conditions are prevalent, as we all know, in the Southwest. Field buildup in excess of 15 tons per acre or more are common throughout the Southwest. Then the potential for crown fires that lead to this kind of a plume dominated fire is always possible. Extremely intense fires today compared to 50, 70, 100 years ago. In a lot of cases, large acres get burned as a result of these catastrophic wildfires. Here's another placard that I saw in East Central Arizona within the last week, and it says, "Fire is a fact of life." Very true what this is stating. Unnatural conditions without fire or other disturbance, a grassland becomes crowded with woody vegetation. Trees must compete with grasses for sunlight and water to stay healthy. And then frequent flames, healthy grassland, periodic fire clears underbrush, thins out, stress trees, and stimulates new growth that attracts wildlife. And then on a landscape scale, fire burns in mosaic patterns, leaving some patches untouched by flames. And so very true in what we see in the fire environment today. Current state of our woodlands. Dense woodland conditions exist on a wide scale. Lends to decrease in herbaceous forage. I just put a few of the points, and this for sure does not cover everything, so you may have questions on this. Potential catastrophic wildfire threatened woodland areas. Firewood harvesting is one activity that occurs in woodlands that help to reduce fuel loading. Forest insects and disease could potentially develop with the absence of management activities. And we are seeing some cases of this today in Pinon or in areas of other juniper species and oaks. Some field projects are conducted in woodland areas through hazardous fuels reduction projects. And in cases where woodlands occur in a wildland urban interface, which we call WUI setting, and then use of prescribed fire as a tool would help address concerns relative to woodland management. Okay, that covers what I have for the slides in the presentation. Anybody have any questions for me that I could possibly answer? Everybody awake?
Hi, Orlando. That was a good presentation. I was wondering if you, when you're doing management, do you delineate like encroached woodlands from, let's say, a historic woodland? Is that a delineation you make?
You know, I don't think we have the best information today here at Fort Apache. We do recognize that encroachment occurs on a wide scale, and encroachment in particular, let's say, for example, juniper, alligator juniper on a grassland savanna type of an area. We see that here at Fort Apache. There have been places on the reservation where land managers have encouraged the use of prescribed fire to rid those areas of junipers. The thing that is challenging land managers when it comes to alligator is a prolific resprouter. And so if you burn an area with alligator juniper or do some kind of mechanical treatment with it, you have to come back within 5 to 10 years to do some more maintenance. And so, you know, it becomes expensive in that way. So yes, encroachment is a challenge for managers.
How much are you guys paying a medium density stand to treat it mechanically?
I don't have an answer for that. You know, I know our land operations branch of the tribe, they have conducted some in the past. And so that information is not accessible to me. So I don't know if Sisto knows something about that. The cost per acre.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was pretty comparable to what the NRCS payment rate for brush management was for the treatment of woody species. And just because now I need to know, I can't remember what that rate was. But a challenge with that, with doing either mechanical or hand thinning, is that you'd be very limited to what you're able to access with equipment or what's safe for a sawyer crew. And at the end, it's not only those relatively flat or rolling areas that need treatment, as Orlando showed with some of the pictures on the slide. There's a lot of, or the slides, there's a lot of areas that are in steep canyony areas. Oh, and then an issue with with going strictly with NRCS funding to treat things as a resource concern is that you could only treat those areas that were historically grassland, and that there was nothing to help with treating areas that have become overgrown or become decadent due to past fire suppression that went on.
I think I can recall when it comes to fields projects in a timber type, they were paying in excess of $300 per acre. So, that appeared to be pretty expensive. And so I would say it would be comparable for treatment in a woodland area, especially if your tree component is dense. And so, the denser your stands, the more you're going to pay. So that's just the way it all works out. Any other
Yeah, so Sisto, that question I asked about the delineation was kind of what I was getting at, about how do you know what's a woodland and what isn't. The other question I have is how do the people in your tribe feel about when you do brush management or prescribed burns? Is that something that they're all educated about and support? Or do you think there needs to be more outreach done on that type of thing?
I think when it comes to prescribed burning, Fort Apache Agency and the White Mountain Apache Tribal Forestry Departments, they do an excellent job of educating the public, and they do it in various forms of media, newspaper, radio, talk shows. And so whenever fire management with BIA are in the preparation stages, that's one of the things that they are good to include, is to share that information with the public so that the public knows that such an activity is going to occur. And the acceptance, I think, is pretty good. I don't think we have a public that has stopped any projects. And so I think as long as we're informing them, that appreciation goes a long ways. And so very important to educate people about your management activities.
Education stuff Orlando was talking about in the outreach, I think, is really important. I'm not sure what what other tribes have gone through, but certainly on the Fort Apache Reservation, there was some questionable practices that went on in the past where I guess working in concert with developers in the Phoenix metro area, there was a lot of riparian species removal and stream straightening that went on. And following that, and following the public backlash and the tribe taking action, there was a whole generation of people that had an idea of saving trees and saving every tree because of what went on with that, with those tree removals, with those riparian species removals to make more water go to the Phoenix area. And so that took a little doing in the past, because people would see you like, maybe they're not necessarily old enough to remember when that area was more grassy, was a grassland, perhaps maybe only had like 1, maybe 2 trees per acre. And in the course of their lifetime, they kind of remembered it as being more woody. And say the reason that area was selected was because it had deeper soils and soils that showed that it was more conducive to being a grassland or a savanna type as opposed to a dense woodland, which oftentimes are more associated with shallower soils, and so they would get upset about that. But as Orlando said, if you're open about things and make some effort to do outreach and to keep everyone informed of not just what's going on, but why, that's really helpful.
I have a question.
Any? Okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Wallace.
My name's Wallace Sosi from St. Michael's, Arizona. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area here. St. Michael is about a couple of miles away from Window Rock, and it sits on the base of the Fort Defiance Plateau Mountains here. And when you drive along between here and Ganado, you see some dying trees, piñons and ponderosa pine. I'm just questioning, is that result of another bark beetle, or is it because it's too dry? What do you think?
I would guess, because I'm familiar with that stretch of road, that it would be attributed to the drought conditions that we are experiencing in the Southwest. Trees are responding in a way, and they work in conjunction with insect populations. Insects will develop through time if drought conditions persist, and I would say that that's probably what's causing that dieback. We see some areas like that on Fort Apache, and it's pockets of ponderosa pine with juniper understories, and so it does appear that it's weather related, and because insects sense that these trees are stressed, they do their attack and they kill trees, and so I would say it's drought related.
And it's pretty extensive, because it's not just like say these pockets that Orlando's talking about on our reservation, or even what you described there, Wallace. There's other parts here in the Southwest that are like that, where, like say, in the past 30 plus years, there may have been a catastrophic wildfire, and there's reforestation efforts that go on, but because of the decreased amount of precipitation for the last several decades, a lot of that reforestation isn't successful, and it's because of like what Orlando's talking about, just not just the recent years of drought, but like extended. It's been a couple decades of having a decreased amount of precipitation for where we live in the country.
You know, one thing that was pretty interesting to me, the past director for New Mexico Cattle Growers Association, he has a ranch south of Tucumcari, and he was saying that when he was reducing the number of piñon juniper on the land that he purchased, the water table, you know, the gallons per minute started to rise in areas that it was really depleted for quite a while. And I forgot one of the statistics that he told us was that some of those piñon juniper were taking as much as, I think, as 22 gallons per day in their root system to grow those trees. So once they started to, you know, not eliminate, but just kind of reduce that area, the water system started to work more fluidly, in different areas of that ranch. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then I know in the past when we did brush management, we did, we tried to go by the cheapest form of how to deal with our overall goals, whether it was chemical or chaining or prescribed burns. And, every single one of them, I think, has its place, but it really depends on, your budget and your overall goals of what you're trying to shoot for. Thank you.
Good point.
There's a question in the chat from Sadie. Due to wildfires and drought, do you provide outreach to communities to reduce fire hazards by cleaning around people's homesteads?
We have the Wildland Urban Interface program with fire management here at Fort Apache, and they do a lot of outreach to the public and communities in general. We have 9 communities, 9 primary communities on the reservation, and I believe all of them have received some kind of treatment adjacent to their communities in some way or form. And so fuels management is an ongoing activity for us, and that has been taking place for about the last 15 years here at Fort Apache. And so, yes, there is that kind of working relationship that our fire management staff have in common with the public.
Also adding to what Delane said, I wished there was more, well, like Orlando pointed out here, that in the past there was pretty minimal data collection in regards to this particular subject. And I wish there had been more at that time, because I think it's the Clifton Ranger District. They have extensive documentation on just what Delane was talking about, where areas that were treated either through thinning or grassland restoration, that many of those areas where like streams had begun to flow intermittently, that the streams began to flow annually again, as well as for springs to start coming back to life that hadn't flowed since the late 1800s, early 1900s.
This is a question for both or either Sisto or Orlando. Can you just explain to us that mechanism of why brush management is important and how that affects the hydrology? Kind of just like what you were talking about, Sisto.
Yeah, it goes along with the points that were just made. Anytime you have a reduction in the density of the trees, you're going to have some kind of response, natural response for increased water availability. And so, in timber types, I know one of the things that I've heard before is that there is a period of time, maybe 5 years, but after treatment, 5 years is the expected period of increased water production, but then it does get stable at some point, and then it remains there, where in the future you can't really tell if that management activity actually continues to produce more water. And so I think anytime you do some kind of density management, you definitely will have some kind of a positive response if that's one of your goals.
And then I would say also depending on the area, and I think we're pretty fortunate on our reservation that it's like the land just wants to be healthy, and the herbaceous species are just like waiting to take off a lot of the time, and it doesn't need to be any very rarely is seeding like absolutely necessary, but in a lot of places those herbaceous species they're no longer present. And so that's something that's really important, is to have some type of seeding and follow up to any treatment, whether it's hand treatments or mechanical treatments or prescribed fire, so that there are some type of herbaceous species there to help slow the water, either to help with infiltration or just even to reduce velocity on runoff, so that with what you're doing with good intentions, be it prescribed fire or brush management, you end up creating other issues because there's no herbaceous species there to help hold the soil together or to help slow water velocity.
We have a question from Chris Borden for Sisto. He asks, what methods work best for you for juniper control on very steep sites? Do any of these methods match any of the equip payment scenarios? And he says that they don't have a good one for the Lake States region.
On our reservation, it's difficult, and maybe Orlando can help with this too, because there are certain restrictions on where we can operate equipment. And so on the steep areas, we will be the only thing we can put in there is hand crews, and I'm not sure if even that's allowed in some areas, but with that, a hand crew operating in a steep area, there's nothing with equip that's gonna like, even for us to get the historically underserved rate, that's gonna get close to it. So certainly not on the, like, if you're a stateside rancher, is there anything that's going to do that? But I would say for the steeper areas, hand crews, and then to work very closely with like, say, our tribe's fire management, to be followed up with some type of prescribed fire afterwards. Is there anything you could add to that, Orlando?
I think you covered it pretty well. You know, steep slopes is something that we do not actively manage for the most part. If anything occurs on steep slopes, and I'm talking something over 40%, most likely it would be like a prescribed burn. And so, but you know, management has to be careful how that's conducted, so that resources aren't negatively impacted as they're conducting the management activity. And so there's all kinds of limitations that come from I think just trying to manage slopes of in excess of 40% here in our case. So I hope that answers your question.
So the brush management specs written in Arizona for NRCS, they don't treat anything over 15%, I think. So that's the limitation there.
No treatment on over 15% slope.
I'm pretty sure it's 15%, if I remember correctly.
Okay. I wonder if that's within that's policy down in that neck of the woods, or we don't have very much that's 40% slope, but some of it's really critical habitat, has medicinal plants, and the juniper loves it unless we're doing something with it. So
One question I have for our speakers is, do you see any tribes doing any like brush sculpting or building of mottes for wildlife? Because I know a lot of tribes' revenue is derived from hunting. And do you see any of that out there? I
haven't heard of it in our neck of the woods, and so I don't know if Sisto has.
I helped shoot down some projects to contribute to that. There was some of the some projects with that were meant to address thinning, that when we went in there to give my perspective as a range manager, also to speak towards wildlife management, the species that were there were all conducive to wildlife habitat, and in particular, like say with for our tribe, the deer species are very significant, and so all the browse that they were, all the valuable browse species that they were wanting to take out for brush management, it's like, well, do you want deer or do you? And so I helped to shoot down some projects just in the service of wildlife species, and I guess inadvertently create those mott's.
Yeah, because
preserve them.
you know, in my time at the King Ranch in South Texas, there was management efforts. A lot of incomes derived from quail hunting, and then also white-tailed deer hunting. And if they got too carried away with clearing out a lot of the brush management, like having more than I think it was like 100 yards or 80 yards between cover, then you know, the deer wouldn't use that area. And then same way with you know, those coveys for the quails, I guess, if it got too extensive with clearing it out, like maybe like an improved pasture situation. So I guess their thinking was that, you know, there's a balance, you know, between management and production, cattle production and wildlife management. So that'd be interesting to see how, if the tribes address that in the future.
I think there's a place for it, because there are times that there are good intentions, and people like say, like some of the wildland urban interface projects that Orlando was talking about earlier, where instead of like the total removal that say these areas that we're familiar with, to go ahead and leave those white oak and gray oak, some of those species that produce mast, mast being the acorns, or even other browse species like mountain mahogany and cliff rose, and that are valuable browse, to not totally eliminate those, or if there are pockets of them, to let those be, and to make sure to treat only the target species, like the different juniper species Orlando was talking about, the Utahs, the one seeds, the alligators, and those types of plants.
Yeah, I think you know, thinking about it a little bit more, I think it really depends on your management objectives for the land that you're managing and what you're managing it for. Because another thing that comes to mind is you know, the predation that we talked about in the past, you know, like the wolf issue, and how, you know, a lot of the predators stay in that heavily covered area, and then you know, the issues with them coming out to open pasture. So I think it really depends on, you know, your local, you know, what your objectives are. So thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a comment, just a while associate here. Looking into the future, not only in the US, but the whole world, on the global warming that coming about. I was watching a documentary, and they said, if we continue to drive using fossil fuel, gasoline, you will need about 15 to 20 trees to offset the carbon release into the air. So that seems to be the other side of the coin. And if you're going to save the world from overheating one day, it's just a comet.
I think for now, climate issues are going to be at the forefront of a lot of discussions in the Southwest. And so not too many people are trained yet to help address that issue. And so, we hear it, but do we get trained or prepared for it? Do we talk that language when we do our management activities? I think is another question. And so, very good point on that.
And then with that, it's only been in the last, I think about the last 20 to 25 years that they've been able to actively or accurately keep temperature records as well as like deep sea temperature records. And so it's very difficult. And then catastrophic climate change is something that people can be concerned about for sure, but we have to keep in mind, okay, I'm not just saying pollute or like we should like say air places like China should just be allowed to go nonstop with emissions, but through human history, the times of the most catastrophic events to any civilization, whether it's Western civilization, Eastern civilization, any of those were in times of cold snaps, and that the times that well, I'll just use Western civilization as an example. Times that of flourishing of cultures of, well, just use Europeans, I guess. European cultures flourishing were in those warmer periods, whether that was during the Roman Empire, whether that was during the Age of Enlightenment, or following during the Renaissance period, and then the other times, the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages, the medieval period, and all of those were during times of excessively cool times. So I think any direction, whether is catastrophic, and we just have to
I think, Sisto, you were cut out.
one of the best things that we can do is to help
Okay.
ourselves adapt to whatever may come.
You kind of cut out there a little, sister.
Well, maybe the powers that be on the internet didn't want me to they didn't want people to hear that.
We heard the important part to adapt
Okay.
to whatever may come. So there you go.
Yeah. So
Are we at the end of our presentation, or do we have other questions? Concerns?
perhaps not.
Sister, you tell me.
I think this is a good place to end.
Okay.
Yeah, Leander said,
Okay.
great job. So I guess we can end on that note.
All right.
Okay, I just want to close out by saying thanks for the opportunity to talk with this group. I enjoy talking, and I'm also learning as I go because, you know, definitely Woodlands management needs more attention, and agencies can dedicate more focus on the topic, and also creating positions to help address Woodlands management. It's definitely one of the areas that deserve more attention in the future. And so with that, I thank you all very much, and I hope I was able to lend you something that will help us all to think about the future. And, you know, a lot of good points were made. And so thank you very much for participating and for inviting me.
You bet. Thanks for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much, Delane and staff.
All right. Well, have a good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining in.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you, Sisto. Talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate you agreeing to do this. And I think it opens the door for things, and for like some of our well, like the gentleman from the Great Lakes area, you don't realize that it's more than just the Southwest, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All
Well, it's good
righty.
talk